World Environment Day 2022 theme is Only One Earth. This Only One Earth calls for collective, transformative action on a global scale to celebrate, protect, and restore our planet. It shines a spotlight on climate action, nature action, and pollution action while encouraging everyone, everywhere to live sustainably. Let's look at all these three actions and try to understand what work is going on, what work has been done, and what things that we can still do to realize this theme of Only One Earth. Climate action, we all know that the world is in a climate emergency, a code red for humanity. The greenhouse gas emissions, they are choking our world. To limit the global temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius and aiming for 1.5 degrees Celsius, as promised in the Paris Agreement, the countries must cut 30 gigatons of GHG emissions, which is 7.6% annually by 2030. So this is a need. This is an urgent call that to limit this global temperature rise. We all are observing the climate changes because of the different weather conditions that have erupted in various countries and around the world. The weather has changed. The climate has changed over the years. So all this change that we are observing is because of the change in the climate, rising of the temperatures, and we need to cut this down. The major cause is the greenhouse gas emissions. And amongst them, the major cause is the release of the carbon dioxide. So we always talk about the carbon footprint. So we need to cut down this emissions to 30 gigatons of GHG, 7.6% annually by 2030. UNEP has laid down 6 sectors, a roadmap to a carbon-free future. And it works and suggests different strategies on which it tries to do that. So as you can see, we need to reduce the 30 gigatons, and the major 6 sectors that we talk about are shown in this graph. Energy is a major aspect. So energy, because we are the emissions that are because of the burning of the fuel, because of all these things, we are consuming our fossil fuels like anything and emitting all the energy into the environment, which is causing the rise in the temperature, the global temperature. So this energy needs to be cut down. And how, and they are doing it and they are propagating it, is basically by shifting to non-renewable energy, shifting to the renewable energy sources, and also lowering down the use of the energy. They are reducing the use of the energy which is there. So as you know, we celebrate different days accordingly where we want to cut down these emissions, as well as we want to look at the alternate sources of energy, the renewable sources of energy. We are getting devoid of our fossil fuel stocks, and soon we can see that the consumption is so high for petrol, for diesel, for all different kinds of fuels. So we need to look at the alternate renewable energy resources. And mind that we do not need very new innovations and processes to do that. Even with the existing technologies, these alternate energy sources can be used, and lessening of the energy can be emphasized upon that can cut down the emissions that is coming from the energy sector. The industry sector, again there are so many overlap things because industry is also producing a lot of energy. But again, in the industry, we need to talk about restructuring the processes, the product processes, so that the emissions are less. Consumption is less. Even for the energy, it's less. Again, looking at the alternate renewable sources of energy for cooling and heating systems, that is basically required. To adopt the processes which are energy efficient and which is very, very much sustainable, So all these are the methods, these are the works that the United Nations has been doing and propagating as well, so as to cut down or reduce the emissions that are causing the climate change. So these are the climate action strategies that it has been adopting. Even in the agriculture and food industry, lot of emissions can be cut down by utilizing the new food production processes or the solutions, by reducing the food waste or the food lost and shifting to a more sustainable diet. So the consumption, again you can realize that when we are talking about these methods, going back to the initial determinants when I talk about. So even at the individual level, even at the people level, the local level, the community level, the action plans or the changes can be taken or are taken so as to affect the global aspects of human well-being. So even changing into a more sustainable diet by individuals can lead to cutting down the emissions. Healthy cooking, even the gases which are there, which are used, or the food products that are basically used, going the natural way, it is going to, because it will reduce the kind of processing done for all the processed food that is eaten. So the change in the lifestyle, the change in the dietary habits will also cause the reduction in the emissions. New food products need and solutions should be adopted, and therefore it will cause the reduce in the agriculture and food sector as well. Now coming to the nature-based solutions, there is a lot of emphasis on the nature-based solutions for the human health and well-being. This includes, for example, halting deforestation, ecosystem degradation, and restoration of the ecosystems to their original kind, or at least to the kind where it is sustainable, where it is not impacting the environment very adversely. So ecological restoration is a talk of the town, that one needs to look at the nature-based solutions. The imbalances, the degradation of the ecosystems that is causing the imbalances in the nature, leading to again the climate change, needs to be averted, needs to roll that back by the ecological restoration processes which are there. Transport sector, again the emissions can be reduced by switching over to electric vehicles, creating and utilizing these vehicles even for private and public transportation. The emphasis on the usage of public transportation, then basically or something which is non-motorized transports, like the usage wherever possible, depending upon the climate conditions, depending upon the distances one need to travel, one can walk even for like 100 meters or 200 meters, or just going to a shop which is within the society. One need not take a car, one can walk, one can take a bicycle. So these transport emissions, carpools, the transport emissions can be cut down if in this sector certain kinds of works are done. So again the emissions would be reduced. And then the infrastructure, the building and infrastructure. We talk about the smart cities today. We talk about the zero waste or zero emission cities, where everything is run by the renewable resources. We talk about the solar energy. We talk about the hydro energy. We talk about developing such cities which are self-sustained by utilizing these renewable resources. So if the emphasis is laid on these 6 sectors, then the emissions can be reduced to a desirable, or at least reaching to a desirable content. The United Nations talks about this, and on the World Environment Day we re-emphasize and re-tell ourselves that these things need to be done. And this is for the peace and prosperity of ourselves, for our next generations to come. And all this can be done within the global partnership networks, and that is what is being doing. Coming to the second action, which is the nature action. Now, I am touching only certain aspects of these action because I am giving you a global or an overview of what do we mean by this only one earth, how we can have a relationship with this earth, and how our actions can impact or reverse the negative impacts on this earth, the only home that we have. There are many other aspects that can be discussed. So I'm just taking some of the examples and some of the points to convey this message that all of us should pledge on the World Environment Day to consider this only one earth wholeheartedly and work towards its well-being. Coming to the nature action, the nature underpins the functions and health of the planet, and thereby the existence and health of the humankind. We started with this, our session, when I said what we understand with environment is the nature around us. So when we talk about the surroundings, our nature, it is a major determinant for the health and the well-being of the individuals or for the humankind as a whole. 3/4 of the land and 2/3 of the oceans are now impacted by humans. So when we talk about nature, we talk about soil, we talk about water, we talk about air, we talk about all these things that are around. And all this has been impacted by the humans. An estimated 720 to 811 million people suffered from hunger in 2020. 2.3 billion people in 2021 lived in water-stressed areas. So these are some of the numbers that I am highlighting, again, to emphasize upon the importance of the nature around us. Why we need to take an action to protect our nature. Why we should consider all this thing as a part of our home and therefore work towards its restoration and protection. So these are some of the alarming numbers. It again, correlates with the goals that we laid down in Sustainable Development Agenda. The first one is emphasizing upon the zero hunger agenda that we have taken up, because it needs an urgent call of an action. As you can see, so many people suffered from hunger in 2020. This talks about food security, and the food security in turn is based upon the life on the land. It is based upon the cleaning and the sanitation facilities that is provided. So all this, the health and well-being of humankind is affected by that. When we talk about they lived in water-stressed areas, it talks about the importance of water. It talks about the various things that is impacting the water, be it the next aspect which we talk about, the pollution or the wastage that the humans are doing. It needs to be contained. Ensuring the resilience of our planet through conservation, restoration, and the sustainable use of nature. This is the primary principle behind the nature action that is taking place. So what are some of the actions? Educating for sustainability. So by developing and sharing expertise on updating education frameworks, curricula and education policies, by fostering partnerships and information exchanges among universities. For example, UNEPs do this under the youth programs, the Youth and Education Alliance. By sponsoring or organizing adult education courses and massive open online courses. I hope at this point you again realize why quality education was considered as an important goal in our agenda of sustainable development goals. Because educating for sustainability is very important. And when you impart quality education, then you create a society which is aware of the status of the deterioration of the environment, of the aspects, how to restore it, what to do, how to strategize, what policies to lay down, what innovations need to be made. So this is an important nature action that the UN takes place and the things that should be taken up. Engaging businesses, again the corporates, including the corporates, advocacy to persuade the companies to quantify their risk exposure to environmental impacts with a view to reducing costs. More of the climate change, more of the deforestation, they are going to impact their processing and production of the products. They are going to affect their turnover, the companies. So making them realize that the profit is not just that of producing, and it's not for a short term. For sustainable future, even the environment is going to affect their produce and products and consumerism and everything. So making the corporates realize this aspect. The practical tools and capacity building for integrating natural capital factors into loan, bond and equity products. For example, giving a credits, the water credits which are basically there. So more they save, more they get, including them into their loans and bonds and equity products. So making them aware of such things. So this is how the engaging business goes on. The financial planning for integrating ecosystem management at the country level. So this is again very, very important nature action that is being taken and needs to be taken when we want to take the entire earth as our home. Another aspect is accounting for the ecosystems. That is promoting awareness of our dependence on ecosystems and their economic impact. So we are accountable for the status of the ecosystems, and we should realize that fact. Just by living our own lives and ignoring the things which are in our surroundings will fetch us no good future. Even our present is deteriorating. So promoting that awareness is an important aspect that we need to realize, at least on the World Environment Day. Developing and promoting knowledge products and tools on how to value and account for ecosystem goods and services. Build expertise on how to value and include natural capital in national statistics and as a key criteria in policy making. So the consideration of the natural capital. So natural capital is again very important. When we talk about the assets, we need to consider the natural assets, and therefore these statistics also need to be a criteria in any kind of policy making that goes through, because directly or indirectly all our actions are impacting our surroundings, are impacting our environment. We are no isolate creatures. We are living in interrelationships and interconnections and relationships that we talked about when we started with this session. Preserving the ecosystems. We make knowledge and data on the state of ecosystems accessible. One should know what is the status of the ecosystem so that they realize that we need to preserve these ecosystems. They need to design an establishment of monitoring systems for ecosystem health and functioning. Robust systems need to be there so that we assess that how much it has been degrading, and therefore we need to work harder. We need to strategize and innovate so that we can have restored them back. The development of biodiversity and conservation strategies. Again, talking in terms of global aspects. Biodiversity, very important. We talk of production, we talk of conservation, we talk of restoration. All these strategies with respect to the biodiversity. We talk about different species conservation. United Nations is doing work on species such as gorilla, orangutan, all these species conservation as well, even the water species. So again, preserving ecosystems is an important action, an important nature action that needs to take place. The decade on ecosystem restoration, as I said, in 2021 on on the World Environment Day, the decade on ecosystem restoration was launched. The restoration of 350 million hectares of degraded terrestrial and aquatic systems were pledged. And there are many different aspects, it counts for a dedicated session if we talk about decades on ecosystem restoration. But my idea is basically to sensitize you about these actions that have been taken place and to realize the fact and to revisit these aspects that how important they are and what still needs to be done and how more of these things can be emphasized. So, the restoration of 350 million hectares of degraded terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems was pledged for this decade in ecosystem restoration. Now, restoration can happen in many ways. For example, through actively planting or by removing the pressures so that the nature can recover on its own. So, as I said, this can account for a complete session, but I wanted to emphasize on the fact that when we talk about ecosystem restoration, it is not just planting trees, it is not just keeping the biodiversity, back. We can at least move the pressures. We can at least move the anthropogenic pressures that are on different ecosystems so that the nature can recover on its own. Nature has devised its own ways, but because of our activities, it has broken down. The system is breaking down. If we remove these pressures, even if we do not work towards to restore it, at least if we can remove the pressures, then also the nature can recover on its own. So the restoration, again, these two are very, very important aspects that need to be looked into, pledged, create strategies and devised and implementation has to be there. These are some of the sustainable, linking them to the ideas and actions that we have discussed to the sustainable development goals. So we are moving towards 2030 to realize these goals, and whatever strategies and actions that we are taking up, they realize one goal or the other. The zero hunger goal, the no poverty goal, life on land, life on water, bioeconomy, clean water and sanitation, all these things are basically dealing and talking about the sustainable development goals as well. Coming to the third action, which is the pollution action. Now, chemicals and waste are integral to our everyday life, but they also have major impacts on the environment and human health. By 2025, again to state some numbers, the world's cities will produce 2.2 billion tons of waste every year, more than 3 times the amount produced in 2009. So you can well imagine the kind of impact that we are creating on the environment. And we need to, that is where I say that even if we are not able to fully protect and conserve, let's try to remove the pressure. Let's try to cut down the emissions. Let's try to cut down the waste production every year so that the ecosystems, the world, our earth can heal back. So there comes the pollution action. So this is talking about the building sustainable and long-term capacity. So many projects have been taken up. Here I list some of the important focus areas where it talks about the lead, where it talks about the polyhydrocarbons. It talks about the antimicrobial resistance, which is much prevalent and a direct impact on the environment. It is a very cause of concern, the antimicrobial resistance, and I just talk about a little more on this aspect. But you can see that to build the sustainable and long-term capacity of our earth, we need to look at, and these projects are being running by United Nations, and we need to look at how to minimize the adverse impacts of all these chemicals and wastes and how to let our earth breathe and let ourselves breathe. This is a very interesting flowchart which talks about the impact of prevalence of antimicrobial resistance. It is a major cause of concern. I'll talk about the role of microbes in sustainable development goals or role of the microorganisms that it plays in environment, the sustainable environment in my next session. But this talks about a very key aspect of the antimicrobial resistance and how it is spreading across all the strata in the soil, in the water as well as in the air. So you can see the waste and the toxicant or the pollutant And you can also see the associated microbes that are gaining more and more resistance towards this thing, because naturally the nature has microorganisms that can detoxify or that can degrade these pollutants that we are putting in the environment. But on a two-scale thing, because what we are leaving in the environment, the pace at which we are putting these wastes or polluting the environment is much more than the pace by which the nature can heal or restore itself back, or can basically try to combat this pollution. There is a major gap between that. And apart from that, these microorganisms are also the ones which used to degrade these toxicants that are released into the different strata of ecosystems. They are becoming more and more resistant to them. So neither they are degraded and they are released into the environment at a larger pace. And you can see that what are the natural ways by which these toxicants and the pollutants go into these strata, how the microbes are associated with it, and how the resistance is creating, leading to a major antimicrobial resistance in the environment, impacting the environment. And there comes the concept of One Health. So when we talk of One Earth, creating the entire earth as our home, then we should also consider the aspect of One Health, where the actions need to concentrate on health of not just and well-being of not just the humans, but of the flora, of the fauna, of the sea, the soil, the air. All things have to be considered as under One Health. And in the last panel, I just show you again the correlation with the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, that what actions can be taken, and this is an emergent and urgent call for action that need to be taken so as to attain and address these Sustainable Development Goals through the concept of One Health and One Earth. So on the World Environment Day 2022, let's pledge, let's realize that we only have one earth, which is our home, and let's pledge to restore it, to reheal it, and live and have a very sustainable and peaceful and prosperous future. Thank you.